Hey everybody, it's Tim and Steve from Phantom History House.
Hey everybody, great to see you. We have a great episode for you tonight of Phantom History House Calls. We have Dr. Chris Sumner with us tonight, who's going to talk about dark tourism and its impact on historic locations.
Really, really interesting. So thank you for watching Phantom History House Calls. All right, so thanks everybody for tuning in, and we've been busy.
We have been busy. I mean, it is obviously 400 degrees outside right now, but we are still staying busy. We spent this past weekend over in St. Petersburg and had a chance to check out Harmony House when they had their first ever intuitive arts fair.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So there was a room of people doing readings and those kind of things, and then there was another room where we were, like the vendors and stuff. And it was a lively thing. It was great for her the first time. Congrats to her for making that happen.
Yeah, and if you're here in the Tampa Bay area and you're looking for a really cool venue space or a hangout space, check it out. They're not too far from Gulfport, and it's kind of like a creative space. It can be a gallery, it can be a venue, it can be really whatever you want it to be. And we had the pleasure of working with Ever, who was kind of running things over there, and she was fantastic. So thank you to Harmony House.
Yeah, and if you're watching live, please type in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. And of course, tonight we're talking about
dark tourism.
And you might be thinking, what is dark tourism? So we're going to be explaining that. We have an authority here. It's going to be a really, really interesting conversation. Other things going on next weekend, our last seance before the fall spooky season starts.
Exactly. Yeah. Brian Mama Kowalski will be back here on the 7th. We'll be doing the seance here, probably in our dining room once again. And remember, prior to that, you can actually sign up for some tarot card readings as well. And if you go to our website, you can go ahead and book your time.
Yeah, please do book ahead, because a lot of that time tends to sell out.
Yeah.
And we are getting into, we're excited to be sharing Phantom History House as a wedding venue. And so there's an open house. It's a great date night for wedding couples to be.
Those who are engaged. Yeah, come check us out. We're going to have the house open for you to kind of tour, check it out, see if we are a good fit for you for your wedding. We are. And we'll have our friend Simple Weddings here with us as well, who will kind of help you envision what that event could be like. And we are also very excited to say that we have our first wedding scheduled.
We do. I've just realized that I have my Band-Aid. My Star Wars Band-Aid is on my thumb, and I feel like a 4-year-old. Like every time I was moving my hands, it's like, what is going on?
So you're injured.
If I'm going to hitchhike, I'm going to do it with BB-8, apparently.
Yes, with the Force.
But anyway, yes. So we have our first wedding scheduled. We did a wedding giveaway for this summer, and then of course June 14th is the night of our big date night open house. If you know anybody that's looking for a venue, we hope they'll come. I'm going to do baked goods and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be wine, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And hello to Diane from Claremont, Florida, and Miranda in East Tennessee. Hey, Miranda. We really appreciate you tuning in. And remember, throughout the night tonight, if you have questions for us or for our guest, Dr. Chris Sumner, please feel free to type those in. And I'm really excited to bring Chris on, because I had the opportunity to talk to her, about a year ago now, when I did a Phantom History podcast episode about the historic Scott County Jail in Tennessee.
And I remember I mentioned, because I like put it all together, do the little editing of the videos, get the web page ready and everything. Yeah. And I remember saying to you, she is great on video. Like, she was just so good at presenting her stories. And of course, I know that's something that they do in their business there, but I was super impressed with her. So I'm excited to get to have her here live. Do you want to bring her on?
Chris and Miranda were both fantastic. Yeah. And we've had Miranda here. Chris still owes us a visit. We're going to make that happen. But yes, let's bring Dr. Chris Sumner on.
All right. So
hey,
how are you?
I am fantastic, guys. How are you doing tonight?
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. And hi to Kelly and Kristen, who are watching online. Guys, get those questions going whenever you have them, because this is going to be really interesting.
Yes. And hi to Dark Attractions in the UK. We need to talk, because I'm always looking for more places to talk about.
Yeah. Email us.
We need to talk to them too.
Social media, by all means. Wow, that's cool.
So the first thing I want to ask you, Christy, is dark tourism. It's a word, it's a phrase that I think I know what it means, but I'm probably not exactly right. So in layman's terms, what is dark tourism?
Well, dark tourism is looking at places or going to places because they have a unique past and history, specifically in such things as wars or battles or some type of a disaster. So, for example, Gettysburg, right? That's a location where there was a large battle. So, capitalizing on the story of the battle, the Titanic Museum, that is obviously a museum dedicated to the tragedy of the Titanic sinking, and so that's really what dark tourism is, going to these locations for the exploration of different historical events, but those things that are more toward the tragic side. And right now, it's a $30 billion industry. I think mostly driven by podcasts, by true crime. So a lot of people right now are very much interested in going to these locations. And for me, I also differentiate a little bit from dark tourism to more after dark tourism. So I do think that there's a little bit of a difference there, where you're looking at a dark tourism location, again, like the Titanic, like Gettysburg, but after dark tourism really can be utilized at any historic location, and how dark, quote unquote, you want to go into your historic background is up to you or the owners or the managers of that location. So I tend to really kind of put a caveat on, you don't have to go to dark tourism per se. If you're a historic location looking for revenue dollars, you can just do things after dark.
Okay. I like that explanation, because you're right. I think a lot of people thought, like myself, dark tourism was super haunted, super spooky, but that's not what it means. It really is, connecting to the past of the location.
Correct. So, and like I said, in terms of dark tourism, when you look at that, obviously your mind goes to something like Titanic or Gettysburg or Jack the Ripper from the UK. Those type of things are those dark tourism elements and aspects of what most people traditionally think of when they're looking at this type of tourism industry. But again, you have some historic locations that maybe have a sensitive history or sensitive past, and it really is up to them to delve into how dark, quote unquote, they want to go. So what I'm looking at is really after dark tourism, those things that you can do when the lights are off. And again, you can decide how much of your history you want to go into. But basically what you're providing your guests or visitors is just that past in a different light.
And that's, of course, something you do there at the historic Scott County Jail. I mean, you and Miranda really embrace the history of the place with your daytime tours and your nighttime tours. So you're a living example of this, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So for those who don't know, the historic Scott County Jail is located in Huntsville, Tennessee, and it's a jail that was built in 1904. It was in operation as the jail until 2008. It had both men and women inmates here. And from 2008, really up until 2021, when Miranda and I opened the museum, it sat vacant. But now we've allowed the history really to come to life. We offer daytime tours here, but honestly, most of our revenue comes from after dark, whether it be historic flashlight tours, paranormal investigations, guided ghost hunts, flashlight tours with a ghost hunt element. So really what we're doing is providing not only preservation dollars into the building itself, but also to the community as a whole. And that's really what I'm trying to get out with this study that I've been doing on after dark tourism, to show these locations that, you can make money because the visitors now want to have a unique and personal experience, and you can give it to them with the lights off.
Yeah, and we hear that a lot too. People are looking for experiences now, and I love that people seem to be embracing history again, because it's so easy to lose track of that. But there's so much right under our feet and right around us that a lot of people walk by every day and they don't even recognize as being historic. And I mean, you are in a beautiful historic building. It's obvious when you walk up to it, like, wow, this place has seen some things, which I love. What is your advice whenever you go and give these talks about this study? I mean, it sounds like it's mostly how you can thrive off of this kind of dark tourism.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so what I've found is, well, first of all, let me just backtrack for those who in the audience who don't know. I've been studying after dark tourism for about 2 years now, especially since COVID. And so I really wanted to put some research and almost an academic spin, if you will, on after dark tourism, to find out where historic preservation, or where historic locations are getting their revenue and if they've considered After Dark means to do that. And so this latest iteration of my study, it happened in February of this past year. I sent out surveys to 606 historic sites and historic museums across the country. I had 241 responses, which gives me about a 35% response rate. So I have a good amount of data to analyze and study with regard to this. And so what I wanted to do is to show these locations that there is money to be had. You can tap into that $30 billion a year industry and not lose sight of the historical narrative of your location, and which obviously is so important. But the drawback that I'm running into when I give these speeches, or whenever I just gave out the survey in general, is for lack of a better term, you've got these old guards that are looking after these museums, that are looking after these historic locations, and they really don't want to change how they've done things in the past. Well, especially since COVID, what they've done in the past isn't working. So for example, when I asked the question, have you seen an increase in visitors since COVID? Over 62% said that their visitation rate has remained the same or decreased from pre-COVID numbers. And so that to me is extremely telling. That means that you have to look at other revenue streams if you want to attract these visitors. Now, when you couple that with the fact that the new trend in tourism is historic tourism and experience tourism, by your very nature, you can attract these people through After Dark tourism. And that's really what I'm trying to essentially preach with what I'm doing with the After Dark tourism study.
And I love that you're taking such a scientific approach. I mean, obviously you are a doctor, this is what you do, and you are a collector of data, which is amazing. You know, a lot of people are intimidated by data, especially numbers, myself included. So the fact that you're able to take this really cool snapshot, I think is incredible, and making people think of it a way that they haven't thought of before. And before we go on, I did want to show a quick picture of the Scott County Jail. For those of you who have not seen it, isn't this like not the coolest building ever? And I love this photo. So if you are ever in Tennessee, make sure you in Scott County, Tennessee, I should say, look them up and do one of the tours with Christy or Miranda and their team. We have not been there yet, but it is on the plans. We definitely want to be there and check it out. So we, of course, are not an old, historic, creepy home. We were built in 1980, but we have embraced the history of what our house is, as we've built kind of Phantom History House around it. And we've been celebrating the nearby town of Oldsmar and Hillsborough County to kind of tap into that too. And I've noticed since COVID that a lot of the people that I know are trying to look for these, I don't know if it's an Ancestry.com thing that's happening, but they're trying to go back to like where their roots are. Is that a part of this as well?
Absolutely. So from what I found and through the research that I've done, places like Disney World, Universal, these traditional tourist hotspots are really losing ground to these locations that are historical, that allow visitors to have a tangible connection to the past. Again, I think a lot of this has come out of COVID, where we were so closed up. Now people understand that we've got to kind of get back to your point, our roots, to get back to the history, and then to look at these different historical places and really be able to have a tangible connection with that. So, I can go to Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, which is just down the road from us. I can go to the St. Augustine Lighthouse. I can come here to the jail, and all of those locations have a unique individual story to tell. And that's what's so great about After Dark tourism. My story here at the jail is much different than what Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary has, but we can both capitalize on that uniqueness and capitalize on the After Dark market, because we've got people that want to have those experiences at each location. So my having an After Dark program here at the jail is not going to detract from Brushy Mountain. It's not going to detract from Rugby or any other of these locations. And that's another thing that I'm trying to get people to understand, especially when you're fighting for tourism dollars. It doesn't have to be a battle between us. If we combine forces, we can all tap in and get those revenue dollars. And back to your point just a little bit earlier, when Miranda and I first had the plan to open a historic and what we call haunted location or paranormal research location, the very first thing that we did is we came up with a business plan that highlighted the numbers, the revenue dollars that could be had, not just by us, but by the county, by the town, to the restaurants and other tourist locations here that people might want to visit. And so the very first thing that we always lead with are those revenue dollars. And that's the conversation. Sorry, I've got a cat. That's the conversation that you need to start with when you're looking at doing these different programs, because people think in dollars and cents. And then it's like, oh, okay, we can capitalize on all of these things. And that's really what Miranda and I spent a lot of time doing. And when we had a meeting with the alderman and the mayor of Huntsville, that's what we led with, not the fact that we're going to do paranormal investigations, not the fact that we're going to have guided ghost hunts or really capitalize on the historical narrative of the jail. No, it's the fact that we were going to attract people from across the world, not just the country, to this small town of Huntsville, which, if you don't know where Huntsville is, it's a very rural town. We have about 2,200 residents in the town. I think there's only about 21,000 in the county itself. So it's a very rural location, but yet we have people coming from Michigan, Iowa, New Zealand, the UK, just to visit this location here at the jail. And so when you're able to show that first and foremost, then that allows the conversation to be open to what we wanted to do to bring those visitors here.
Yeah, and you've done such a great job. Your marketing's fantastic. Your website's great. Your social media is fantastic. And I want to encourage everybody who's watching to drop those questions in the chat. I will get to those. I promise, once I go through my long list of them. I'm seeing some of them that I plan to ask too. So I appreciate you guys doing that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between we are a historic and very cool place versus we are a haunted, historic, very cool place. A lot of places are afraid to kind of embrace that haunted aspect, or they're just a skeptic and they don't think ghosts exist. How do you approach those that may be on the more skeptical side?
Well, first of all, through this study that I did, one of the questions that I asked is, first of all, do you believe and let me go back just a second. This survey went out to the owners and operators or managers of historic sites and historic museums throughout the country. And so one of the questions that I asked is, do you personally believe in ghosts or spirits? 48% said yes. Another question that I asked is, do visitors ask if your location is haunted? 79% said yes. And so to me, that already says that you've got a built-in audience that's ready to go, that if you offered after dark programming, that you're going to get that audience to come to your location. And so back to your original question, for us, and I know a lot of the places that do embrace after dark tourism, the history is always the driving factor in whatever we do. Whether it be you have a guided ghost hunt, whether it be you have a flashlight tour or take our ghost walk or do a paranormal investigation, the historical narrative is the first and foremost thing that we tell you about, and that we stress that if you're going to put out any type of social media video or whatever about our location, that you have to have correct, especially for paranormal investigators. Now, obviously, that's a different beast than what some museums or locations want to embrace. But for us, we have embraced paranormal investigations, and they're a great revenue source for us, as well as some of the locations that I've spoken to. And so we automatically say, when you have a paranormal investigation here, that you have to have the history right if you're going to put it out on social media. And I know that there are some places that are hesitant to embrace their history, but or have it portrayed in an after dark setting. But my response to that is, you're telling that history during the day. Start by just telling that history at night. Because what you're doing is you're showing those guests a different experience, right? Even if you're just doing a historical tour, do it in the dark, because you're automatically opening different senses that they're not having during the day. Because we'll have people come to after dark that just want to take a history tour. They have no interest in the paranormal. They have no interest in ghosts. They just want to see our building at night. And I tell you, it's a much different feel at night when you turn the lights off. And so that's really when I have locations that are skeptical about it, that's the first thing that I really start with is, just try this. If you want to try this for a revenue builder, try this first, and then slowly bring in the ghost aspect or the haunted aspect of that. I think a lot of what some of these locations perceive with regard to paranormal or hauntings is what they're gathering from social media. And while social media is great, I do think it's done a disservice to the realm of paranormal investigations and paranormal tourism, because a lot of what it's doing right now is promoting evil or demonic, and that's certainly not what we're about. So that's I think where a majority of these locations are getting their information from, and we want to try to walk back that negative stereotype and say, listen, this is not what it has to be. You know, you can tell your history, you can just do it after dark.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, you know, one of the things we ran into when we first opened was people would ask us, you know, we love your theme. It's very cool. It's paranormal, but are you haunted? And we honestly did not know how to answer that. We're like, we don't know. We don't think so. We don't, you know, but as we've had investigations, we're able to answer that a little bit better. But, you know, we really just kind of leave it to, you know, depends on who you ask. You know, if they've had an experience here, they know it's haunted. If they haven't had an experience here, they're like, oh, you know, it's not, it's just comfortable. So I get walking that tightrope, but we are always very clear that, you know, if there is something here, it's friendly, it's not malevolent, you know, it's playful, you know, and we take safeguards to ensure that. I want to get to some of the questions and comments that are coming in. And there's a lot of them because you are quite popular.
I don't know about that, but thank you.
Well, and we appreciate you sharing this out on your social media as well. This is, let's see, from Dark Attractions in the UK. And you kind of touched on this, but Christy, do you think that an element of the dark tourism is about being immersed in historical events?
I think it has to be, right? So you have to have that historic element. You know, I think that the local 7-Eleven or the local Jiffy store can say we're haunted? Probably not. You're probably not going to be able to, you know, sell milk and tell your haunted story at the same time and get people to bite on that. So I do think that there has to be some type of a historical element that kind of drives that. But it doesn't have to be anything like, you know, like we have it here at the jail. Here at the jail, we've had a sheriff that was shot and murdered right outside our front door. We've had lynchings here at the jail. We've had natural deaths and suicides. Obviously, we're a jail. We have a darker history than some other place. But you know, there's historical houses that really didn't have a dark event per se, but they had a historical figure associated with it. And so I think you can capitalize on that historical narrative and really tap into those after dark dollars because of that unique narrative of that location.
Yeah. One of the things I always joke about is if something's going to haunt me, I want to know who it was. So I want to know the history so I know what I'm dealing with.
Right.
This is an interesting question from Kristen Tortellini. She asked about the historic Scott County Jail. If you ran into any specific roadblocks with the city on opening the museum that you wanted to talk us through.
You know, and I've got to say that if you ever need a business partner, Miranda Young is the most amazing business partner to have because she has a great social media presence. She's got a great background in graphic design and marketing. And so what we did is we met about 7 years ago now through the paranormal, and we're both paranormal investigators. And we had always talked about, since we met, finding a historical location, opening it up for historic preservation, and also what we call a paranormal research center. So once COVID hit, we had really time to sit down and formulate a business plan. And so we spent about 2.5 months formulating that business plan, what it was going to, we came up with a business name, what our merchandise was going to look like, you know, how we wanted to approach the town of Huntsville here in Tennessee, because they still own the jail. We just rent it from them. And so we wanted to get a business meeting with them. So we had several great business meetings. Now we are in the Bible Belt of the U.S. here, and there were a couple aldermen that did have reservations about us offering paranormal investigations, but we had talked about our business plan for so long that we were able to address those concerns. Most of them centered around the fact that they didn't want quote unquote demon chasers here in the town of Huntsville. Now, literally, I can stand on the roof of this jail, throw a softball, and hit 7 churches. That's what I'm talking about when we're in the Bible Belt. And so we assured him that that was not going to happen on our watch here at the jail. And we were very passionate about the fact that this was going to be for historical purposes only, as well as paranormal investigations, and nothing demonic was going to be associated with this. So if you look at our website, or if you come here during a day tour, you would not know that we offer paranormal investigations right off the bat, because the history is what we do and what we're about. That's the driving focus behind everything that we do. And the revenue that we get to fund all of this is really driven by After Dark, by our After Dark programming. So we're able to make that revenue to really keep our lights on. And so to answer your question in a very long-winded way, we did have some questions that we had to answer, but because we had really quote unquote practiced this business plan for so long, we knew the answers and really how to approach the town with that. I lost you.
I also want to add to that, sorry about that, that Christy is not going to stand on the roof and throw softballs at churches. So that's not.
No, I'm not going to do that. I'm just saying my arm and all that. Just joking.
Deb Ireton is watching, and she says she loves your mindset and that her first love is history and paranormal is a bonus for me. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where I am too. I love the history side of everything. Absolutely. And while I've seen some cool paranormal stuff, I want to see more. And that's why I do the podcast, because I want to learn so much. And people like yourself are so willing to share that, which is awesome. You talked earlier about, telling stories at night in the building versus during the day. This is another question from Kristen. She said, does that feel different at night because of the paranormal activity, or what do you attribute that to?
Well, that's a twofold answer. The first one is when you turn the lights off, and just for in the jail, right? Let's just pretend this jail is not haunted. When you turn the lights off at this jail, your senses are heightened much more so than your sight, right? Your sound is more intense. Your smelling becomes heightened. Your sense of touch is heightened, really because you're only in the beam of a flashlight. And I think that's the case everywhere, right? Because you're not relying on your sense of sight at that point to have that experience. And so I think that's where the first thing comes in. Our jail happens to be extremely haunted. So there is that factor for us. And so I can say that here, when you turn the lights off, there is that both of those facets come into play. Now, there are other locations where they might not have as a robust paranormal activity that we do here, but that doesn't negate the fact that you can have a different experience from the daytime to the nighttime. Really, in any building that's historic, that has an interesting story, if you turn the lights off and tell that story via flashlight or lantern light, you're going to have a much different experience, and your visitors are going to have a much different experience.
Yeah, I love how you explain that, because, I do some ghost tours here. I always say, we could do it during the day, but it's way more fun at night. It's just the environment is conducive to that. This is an interesting question from our friends, Dark Attractions in the UK. And it's followed by a statement, so I'll read it all. Christy, does your attraction have a dedicated memorial to those who have lost their lives at your site? I think that's really important. Some attractions have a dedicated memorial to those killed in many places in the UK, like the Tower of London has a dedicated memorial to those executed on the site. That is a really interesting point, and something I haven't really thought about before. Do you have anything like that at the jail?
Well, first of all, I love the Tower of London. I've been there several times. Great place. If you have not been to London, I highly recommend it. And thank you for that question. So as I said before, the history is everything that we do here. So we don't have a memorial per se in the fact that we have some type of placard, but we tell the story of these individuals in a very robust manner. We have an audio tour that details the history of the lives of those people who lost their lives here. And we have stops along that audio tour that detail kind of what they went through in their lives here. We have different newspaper articles and historical research up for display that tells the historical narrative of those locations. So it's not really a memorial in the sense of a traditional placard, but we do have those testimonies that are up there. And also because we're a jail, there's people here who died of natural deaths. There's people here, obviously, that had suicides. So as much as we can, we recognize those individuals. We don't know of the names of all of the people who died here because the jail was in operation for such a long time. But to the best that we can, we do honor those individuals and we tell their stories, which to us is a way of making sure they're not forgotten.
Yeah, I like that. Memorials come in many forms, and one of them is oral history and storytelling. And you talked about visiting the Tower of London, which I'm super jealous that you've been. I want to go at some point. But this is another question from Kristen, and she asked, what is the darkest place you've ever visited? I don't know if that means most haunted or most disturbing, most memorable. What stands out for you? Because you're also a paranormal investigator.
I am.
With Soul Sisters.
Yes. So I am the founder of Soul Sisters Paranormal. And we've been to, some of the most haunted locations across the country, reportedly haunted locations. In terms of stories and narratives, probably the darkest would be the Villisca Axe Murder House. And just from that historical story, obviously a very sad story. You have a whole family being axed to death in 1912. So I'd say that was probably the darkest from a historical narrative standpoint. The most haunted, if we're going to go down the most haunted route, there's so many that come to mind. The one that I love the most, that I could spend so much time in beside the historic Scott County Jail, is the USS North Carolina in Wilmington, North Carolina. This was a battleship that was commissioned in 1937. It served in World War II. It was in every naval offensive in the Pacific Theater of Operations in World War II. It had 16 battle stars. It became a museum in 1961, and it's the World War II memorial for the state of North Carolina. I love that location. I cannot say enough kind words about that location. And I would spend every day there if I could, if I wasn't in the historic Scott County Jail.
You got your hands kind of full, so you can't just go roaming everywhere. For me, I had the opportunity to visit the Ohio State Reformatory a few years ago. Beautiful, huge prison. Shawshank Redemption was filmed there. That whole thing. But the historic side of it and the paranormal side of it had me captivated for like 4 hours on my own walking through. I mean, I would have spent the night there. So I completely get it. They would have had to kick me out. So that fascination, I think, runs so deep for so many of us. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I love that these places will embrace their paranormal side and use that revenue to save history, which I think is kind of like the bottom line to all this.
And I love the fact that you brought up Ohio State Reformatory, because that is a perfect example of not just that building, but the entire town of Mansfield embracing after dark tourism, right? So Mansfield Ohio State Reformatory really led off with the fact we're going to promote our history as well as our paranormal. We're going to offer after dark tourism. We're going to offer paranormal investigations. Now they charge an arm and a leg for it, but that's amazing because it's a great location. It's a big location where you can take a lot of people into and kind of divide that cost if you're a paranormal investigator. But really, once that started, the entire town of Mansfield, Ohio grew a paranormal tourism alliance, if you will, just because the Ohio State Reformatory started that. And I think that's what a lot of communities can do. They can capitalize, all of the locations can capitalize if they kind of come together. The state of Kentucky, there's 12 counties in the state of Kentucky that formed an after dark tourism alliance. And you can get a paranormal passport, and you can go to all of these historic locations on this map through these 12 counties, and that's bringing revenue into each of these locations, and it's giving people a unique opportunity to do something different. And again, since COVID, that's what people are looking for. They're looking for these tangible experiences that are unique, that allows them to do something a little bit different.
Right. And what I also like a lot about these places are doing these paranormal tours is they're also very respectful of the history and the people that live there too. So, and this kind of piggybacks on one of the questions that our friends at Dark Attractions is asking, which I'll read in a second. But, a lot of places have had something very tragic happen, and then they use like a remnant of the building. 9/11 is a really good example. There's a memorial that has parts of the towers. That can get kind of tricky, though, don't you think? On what's the respect line there? It's very hard.
It really is. When you talk about some of the, down here in the South where you have houses that had a lot of slavery, right? Do you want to embrace that? And I'm not saying it's great for every location. I mean, if you have a moral distaste for that, I completely understand, and that is absolutely your prerogative. But that is something that you have to consider. Obviously, someplace like 9/11, the World Trade Center, that'd be a very difficult and touchy subject to deal with. So it has to be up to the owners and managers of those locations to really decide if that's something that they want to do. What I'm saying is through what I've researched is there's a way to do it in a respectful manner, and there's money to be had by doing that, right? Because people are visiting during the day, and now if you give them something, a unique aspect to see your location at night, you can really bring in those revenue dollars.
Yeah, and I think that's important that you said that too, because a lot of us are in business. We need to make our money so we can pay our bills in order to to thrive and also provide this experience, which is what we talked about at the beginning of our conversation. People are looking for those experiences, something that they tell their friends about that nobody else has really done. And I love that we're seeing such a growth of this. And it sounds like that when you give these talks or share this data, people are pretty receptive.
They absolutely are, because I don't think people are really thinking of it from this angle, if you will. Especially, as I said before, you kind of have this old guard mentality with this is how we've done it. This is how we're always going to do it. Well, obviously you're not getting visitors and you're not getting revenue through the door. So let me just kind of backtrack just a second and tell you what we've done here at the historic Scott County Jail. All right. So as I said before, the town of Huntsville owns the jail. Miranda and I own the business History Highways and Haunts LLC. We pay the town rent every month to rent the building. We took over all of the utilities and all of the liability insurance that the taxpayer used to pay. So all of that is now our obligation. So what we've done is we've now provided a revenue to the town. We're providing revenue to save the building and make it accessible to the public. And we've relieved the taxpayer of the burden of providing revenue for the building itself, right? The taxpayer no longer has to pay all of the utilities, the heat, the water, the electric, and all of that. And they don't have to pay the insurance on the building because we've taken that responsibility over. Not only that, when visitors come to the historic Scott County Jail, they're staying in the local hotel because we only have one. They're staying in the local hotel. They're staying in the local Airbnbs. They're spending money in the restaurants. They're buying merchandise here at the location, and we're promoting other historical locations in the community as well. So that is really what we've done, and it's almost like this spoken wheel, hub and spoke type of a situation, where we've got people coming to visit us, but yet these other businesses and the town itself is also getting those revenue dollars as well as the recognition, right? Who in Iowa would think of historic rugby or a historic historic Scott County Jail in Huntsville, Tennessee? Probably not a lot of people in Iowa would be giving us much thought if it wasn't for the historic Scott County Jail and what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're talking about getting past the competitive side of it, because I feel like that's so important. If people realize how it's like, there's so many things that can be a win-win-win, right?
Yeah.
You've just described one so smartly. So I love that you're featuring that angle.
Well, I mean, to me, it's nonsensical to just hold this to myself and nobody else can take part in it. Well, that's silly. We have a different history than Brushy Mountain. We have a different history than the St. Augustine Lighthouse. We have a different history than the USS North Carolina. Why not share and contribute so we all can benefit, right? And so that, to me, it's silly to say that we're the only historic and haunted location in the state of Tennessee. Don't go to anybody else. Come to us. Well, again, that's just nonsensical to me.
Well, and of course, and I would think that, Steve is going to, I was going to say drag me to these locations, but that's not really true. I think it's very interesting. But anyway, if we are making a trip up to see the historic Scott County Jail, we're there. So we're like, what else is here? You know what I mean? Like, that just makes perfect sense to me to see what else is there and stop there as well.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And so it's not just this, just come to us and this is our little hole. No, everybody's contributing here. And the fact that we're now in this building that a lot of people thought should be torn down, that's been sitting here vacant since 2008. We've given it new life. We're telling the stories of everybody who's been associated with this building. I mean, we just had a stepdaughter of one of our former sheriffs give us all of his badges yesterday, right? Because she's so grateful for what we're doing. One of our deputies who've been killed in the line of duty here, their uniforms have been donated to us because people are so appreciative of what we're doing and how we're trying to keep the history alive in this county. Some of it may be bad history, but it's not going to be erased. So we're going to show that history and how it makes up the entire narrative of the county. And so that's what we're really proud of what we've built here. Again, I think that if other locations can kind of understand that you don't have to lose your history to have an after dark program, I think that a lot of people could benefit from this. Because, like I said, I had 241 responses, and only 41% are doing anything after dark. And 30% of that is really only doing something in October. So only about 13% of the locations that responded are doing any type of after dark programming outside of October. And that to me is silly, especially if you're doing it in October. You understand that there's revenue in October. Why not carry that out through the rest of the months, the other 11 months? So that's what I'm trying to kind of get with this study is listen, there's money to be made here.
And you've used data like so powerfully tonight. When you can say, I took this survey, here's all these people's responses, like that is really powerful. And I don't want to go down, like we're wrapping this up now. I don't want to go down like a political conversation, but I feel like you've pointed out something that I think is really important in that acknowledging that there is a dark side to the history of your town, your state, whatever. But then I think there's also the story of how we grew and changed and overcame that and made things better. Like, I feel like that part, people forget that there's a positive side to remembering the downside.
Oh, absolutely. And I can tell you, like I said, we had a sheriff that was killed right outside the front door here in 1925. We had some people from the Historical Society, which is literally 2 buildings over, take our ghost hunt or our ghost walk. And we were telling them things that they didn't even know. Right. They're from the county. They are in the Historical Society. And the research that we've done and that we put out on our ghost walks, they were fascinated by. They said, I didn't even know that. So what we've done is, yes, we had a sheriff that was killed here. His name is now being spoken on a daily basis. His family loves that because here in Scott County, the family lines run long and deep. And so they love the fact that we're telling the stories here. Again, some families may have a problem with that, but what we do is we tell the stories from the published newspaper articles and from the research that we have found. We don't make up any stories. We don't make up any false narratives here. Everything that we put out at the Historic Scott County Jail, we can back up with published articles and newspapers and research. And so again, I think that's what locations need to do and they have to do to tell the historical narrative of their location accurately. But again, if you can do it after dark, you're bringing in an entirely different audience here.
Right. And I also like that. I know that you and Miranda do this, and some of the other people I've talked to at other historic locations do this as well. They have found that as they talk about the history, more history presents itself.
Oh, absolutely.
People have stories that you may not have heard before. Then you know what you're looking for to add to that narrative. So every visit can be different.
Again, you are absolutely right, because we had people come here to take the day tour, and they'll say, oh my gosh, my grandpa was the jailer. I'll go home and see if I can find his uniforms or his badge or his whistle or, something like that. And it just kind of builds on itself. So people come in and say, we love what you're doing here. Can we donate this? Like I said, we just got 2 badges and a whistle yesterday from a gentleman whose wife was the stepdaughter of the sheriff. So that really does open the door. Really telling these stories opens the doors for different things to come about.
Yeah. One final question from the folks watching, and This is a dark question, but we all are talking dark. So this is from our friends at Dark Attractions again. And it's an interesting question. I'll be interested to get your take on this. How do you feel, back up here, how do you both feel that have been, it disappeared on me again.
Sorry.
There have been talks about creating an immersive experience where you could put the VR headset on and walk the steps and stories of those killed in places like Auschwitz. I understand that technology can enhance the visitor experience, but I believe that it also needs to be managed and balanced. I agree with all that. Definitely managed and balanced. What's your take?
Absolutely. There has to be that balance. It has to be done in a respectful way. Absolutely. You can't go in and, like I said before, tell a false narrative. You can't be different than what you are. If you say that, like, for example, here at the jail, right? So we've had some lynchings here. We've had 7 people who were lynched from here. Some of our inmates. We can't go and embellish those stories at all. We have to be true to that narrative. Now, something like Auschwitz, it's and same as 9/11, right? It is a very touchy subject, but personally, I feel that if you can have an immersive experience through the VR, through the virtual reality headsets, and kind of take that walk to get a perspective of what those people went through, I think that'd be a very interesting tour to take. Absolutely. Again, as long as the history is not embellished, because I think that at that point you become very disingenuous to your location, to your visitors, and it starts to spread that false narrative that you just really don't want to be associated with, because once you have it out there, you're not pulling it back. So I Tim and Steve and I talked about this a little bit before the show. One of the things that we absolutely refuse to allow anybody to say here is that there's a demon or there's an evil spirit here inside the jail. You cannot do it. When you're a paranormal investigator, you sign a waiver that you understand that if you put that out there on social media in any context, we will sue you and we will fine you $10,000, because we do not want that negative or that false narrative out there, because once it's out there, you cannot walk it back. We've had several locations contact us to get a copy of our waivers so they can incorporate the same thing. But unfortunately, there's 100 videos out there saying that there's a demon in your location. It's going to be very hard to put that back in the bottle. And so all that to say, you have to be true to the narrative. You have to be respectful of that narrative. And I think that especially what we do here at the jail and what we do at Rugby, and I know what other locations are doing as well, like the USS North Carolina or Fort Duffield or, Octagon Hall, those places, you have to be true to that narrative and allow the paranormal investigators to come in, but in a very respectful manner.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and this has been so fascinating. And we had some people that said that they signed on late. I want to remind everybody that the recording of this entire conversation that's been over 45 minutes now, Chris, you've been so wonderful. It's always here. So once we sign off tonight, the recording will be on the same location wherever you're watching. And we have a sister podcast to the main Phantom History podcast called Conjuring Phantom History, where we will also be putting this information. So if you just go to phantomhistory.com, you'll be able to find it in the near future. But I just want to make sure everybody knows that. And if you're watching it and you think it's really interesting, which it is, or helpful to somebody, let them know it's here too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I do have one final question for you, Christy, before we wrap up. What is left on your bucket list as far as historic locations that you would love to see that you've not been to yet? What comes to mind?
Leap Castle in Ireland. That is the location that is number one on my bucket list. But there are so many. Again, for me, and as well as my twin sister on Soul Sisters Paranormal, it really is having these historical experiences as well. I mean, I get to say that I've touched the doorknobs that Lizzie Borden touched, or walked the stairs of the St. Augustine Lighthouse at night, or spent the night in Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, or been to Villisca. I get to have these tangible experiences with these historic locations, and that to me is what's so special about being a paranormal investigator. Having an EVP or seeing an apparition, that to me is absolutely secondary. But to be able to have that historical experience to put together a video that details the historic narrative of these locations. Like, for example, again, the USS North Carolina. I did a deep dive in the research of that location, and when I put that video out, I had people contact me and say they never realized the historical significance of that battleship. And so to be able to have that type of feedback and kind of open people's eyes to these historic locations that are out there, that to me is what is so rewarding. So long-winded answer, Leap Castle in Ireland.
And of course, we do hope that next time you're down our way that you come by and visit Phantom History House. We can't compare it to Leap Castle in Ireland, but we do like to say we're nice. But we would love for you to come and see the place. And of course, anybody watching, if you ever find yourself in the Tampa Bay area and are looking for a unique and a comfortable place to stay, consider Phantom History House. We would love to have you.
Absolutely.
We are definitely getting the word out about what we're doing here, and we made some great connections, as Tim said earlier. Everybody in the paranormal community has been so friendly, yourself and Miranda included, Christy. So thank you so much for speaking with us tonight.
And we have a lot of things going on here too. So check out our events page at phantomhistory.com and you'll see all those too. Wow. You were so interesting.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I really enjoyed this.
Well, thank you guys. And listen, I want to thank everybody in the comment section as well. Just having this interaction is so much fun. When we get off of this, I will try to answer your questions if we didn't get to them. But thank you everybody for your support, and thank you for asking those questions. Real quick, if you'd like more information on the historic Scott County Jail, please go to www.historicscottcojail.com. That's where you can find all the information on the jail. We also have after dark events at the historic village of Rugby. And if you go to historyhighwayshaunts.com, you can find out all of the information on that. And then Soul Sisters Paranormal at soulsistersparanormal.com is my team. And then if you're interested, my business partner, she is Ghost Biker Explorations, and her website is www.ghostbikerexplorations.com. And then these guys in Tampa, you need to go check them out because they have cool glass bottles and BB-8 Band-Aids. So, I mean, what more can you ask for? So
I love it.
I do have my BB-8 Band-Aid on.
There you go.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for watching. This is absolutely wonderful. And we're doing this every Wednesday night at 7. So keep tuning in. We appreciate it. Yeah.
And if you're watching and you're a paranormal investigator or have a historic location, reach out. We would love to talk to you as well. Not only for this, but also for the Phantom History podcast. So it's all about making connections. And thank you, Christy, so much for taking the time to talk to us. We had such a great time.
Thank you guys. Have a great night. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.